Man, that place is so pretty. It ought to be illegal. I'm not. I just, the legend, the lore, the beauty of that place is the fishing. That one's just, man, it's hard. That needs to be on everybody's bucket list. I know at one point I just sat down and quit fishing just stared.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Tyke.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from Joe Steininger and Mary McDonald in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
I recently took up fishing again after a short break of, like 40 years. Mostly it was my son's influence, but being in a place like the North Country played a big role too. We have a lot of fishermen and fisherwomen around the region, catching fish in rivers and streams in rural St. Lawrence County and Adirondack ponds, even in Lake Ontario. But it's not just folks from our region. Actually, the North Country is a destination for fishermen, especially bass fishermen. In fact, the July and August issue of Bassmaster magazine rates the St. Lawrence River as the #2 best place for bass fishing in the country. Lake Champlain makes the top 100 list as well, as do a couple of places just to the south, Oneida and Cayuga Lake, and, hey, Lake Erie as well. What makes not just a good place, but a great place to fish? And why do so many places in our region make the grade? James Hall is here to tell us. He's the editor-in-chief of Bassmaster, and he's on the line from Birmingham, Alabama. James, thanks so much for making the time.
Oh man, it's a pleasure and honor for me to be here with you guys.
Well, so let's start with the two fisheries from what we think of here as the North Country, northern New York, to make this list. The St. Lawrence River has been at or near the top pretty consistently over the years. What makes it such a great place in a national context versus everywhere else in the country someone could fish?
Well, I tell you, man, the St. Lawrence River, there's something special in the water there, best I can figure. So y'all are sprinkling magic in that particular fishery because it has. You're right, it's been a perennial powerhouse as far as the rankings go, and this last year it just illustrated as the best smallmouth fishery in the world, bar none, and there may not even be a second place as far as the St. Lawrence River and smallmouth go. The water there is fertile. The bass just keep getting bigger. We had an event up there last year, our last event of the year, less than 12 months ago, where we had two anglers top the 100-pound mark over 4 days, which was actually it had never been done before. There had never been an angler on the Elite Series catch over 100 pounds of smallmouth in one event, and then the St. Lawrence produced two of those in the same event. So that is, it was historic, and it appears that the St. Lawrence is just getting better.
Well, and so tell us about the data you use. I mean, you mentioned what it took to win the Elite Series last year in the St. Lawrence, but what's the sum total of the data you use to create this list, and how do you pull it all together over the year?
Yeah, it's painful. Like I mentioned, I have a love-hate relationship with this thing because when we're putting together the 100 Best Bass Lakes list, the rankings, it takes about 2 months in total, almost three, because what we do first of all is we survey all the fisheries departments of every state in the nation. Now, some of them participate, some of them don't, and they give us kind of the foundation to begin the process. So once they rank they do electrofish surveys. They're the ones that stock these fisheries. They're the ones that set the creel limits and the seasons for you guys up north. So having them kind of set the foundation of ranking their own lakes based on their knowledge of it is a really, really good foundation for us. But then we go in, once we kind of get their information, we go in and look at tournament data. Both like at every tournament trail you can imagine, and there are tens of thousands of them out there. We got like Paw Paw's Sunday morning derby on the Lake Mitchell and Randy. So we go through a ton of tournament data, and that does take a long time, and it will either help solidify and elevate the information that we get from the state fisheries departments, or it will say, well, it's not quite as good as they thought it was, just based on the data. So, and we also have what it's kind of our grassroots efforts throughout the U.S. called the Bass Nation, and these are fishermen who are in every state in the nation. They fish just about every pond out there, and there's just tens of thousands of these guys that are just avid and rabid. And each has a president and a conservation director. So we pull all these guys throughout the country as well, and have them rank the lakes that they fish in case there's something that might have slipped through the cracks. So when we kind of get it all down, we collect all that data, get our arms around it. We kind of put it down on paper, throw it in a spreadsheet, and we start looking at the average tournament weights it's taken to catch, and then the big fish, and then how close are the tournaments? Because if one derby is won with 30 pounds and the next 10 guys have 3 pounds, well, then it kind of lets you know that was just that was kind of a one-off. And so we try to avoid the one by ranking highly these one-offs, because every lake can show out every now and again. But we get a blue ribbon panel of industry insiders, some Elite Series anglers, some folks in the industry that have fished for forever, some people in my office. And then we just debate where these lakes are going to fall on the rankings. And then once that debate is over and hopefully no blood has been shed, then we settle on the list and publish it.
Well, and we should get a definition out of the way too. You talk about the best bass lakes, but obviously when we're talking about the St. Lawrence River here, you're taking some liberties with the idea of a lake. These are really bass fisheries we're talking about.
That is correct. It's just not as catchy. Best 100 best bass fisheries. Yeah, that's right. There's lakes, there's man-made, there's tidal fisheries in here as well. So yeah, it's just the best bass fisheries in the U.S. But we throw them all under the lakes name.
Well, and you were saying this, this is obviously a national magazine with thousands of subscribers, and potentially lots of them might travel a few hours or even more to fish. So I would assume that accessibility also figures into this top 100 list.
It does, yeah, accessibility. So whenever we reach out to the conservation directors of the Bass Nation I mentioned earlier, we make sure that the accessibility that there's access, because no private lakes are obviously going to be put on this list. And then there's some public lakes that can be dangerous. And then we also add to the criteria kind of the scenery, because there might be a fantastic pond in the middle of Houston, Texas, and there's nothing but beer cans and whatever floating on top of it. And so we also don't want to send people there. So, so the added criteria are accessibility and kind of scenery. And it's hard to find an ugly place to fish, but they are out there, and we want to try to kind of avoid sending people to those places.
Well, and I suspect if you asked a longtime bass fisherman here in northern New York or California or Alabama or Texas, they would all have this one special place that they think is the best. But this is, I don't want to say lowest common denominator, because that's probably not fair either. But you're not trying to like overload the secret place that the longtime fisherman has been going for 20 years and can only really handle 3 or 4 people in it at once.
Yeah, that is right, and there is kind of a size minimum too. So we don't want to bombard a tiny fishery. Although we have some really small ones on the list. It's smaller than ever this year, but those are some kayak only and bank fishing only scenarios, because not every we have 500,000 readers of Bassmaster, and not all of them have a boat. Some of them just have a kayak, and we want to make sure that they are served as well. So there are bank fishing opportunities and kayak only fisheries out there that are tremendous. So we wanted to make sure that those folks know that this list is not just for them.
So back to the St. Lawrence River for a minute. How does the length of the fishing season factor into your calculations? Because obviously there are folks who have been out for weeks or months in a place like, say the Toledo Bend Reservoir on the Texas-Louisiana border, while we're still canceling school and shoveling snow up here in northern New York.
Well, the length of season does not really measure into our calculations at all. We know that some fisheries have seasons. Honestly, the fact that y'all have seasons up there are probably one of the reasons that these fisheries are so very, very amazing. You look at some of the lakes like Gunnersville that are always on this list, and some of the Toledo Bend, Rayburn, and some Florida fisheries, they're never closed. That's all, and they get um, tremendous pressure because of it. Y'all have the opportunity to duck in when everything freezes over in the ice, but that does give the bass an opportunity to relax and not have a hook, dangling from its face 24/7, because fishing pressure is a real thing and it does affect the catchability of these bass. So for y'all to give these fish a break, I think it makes them more catchable, but it also keeps them quite healthy during a time when they could get damaged or be hurt and really rough weather. So I think that when we look at the rankings and the northern fisheries that have these seasons for bass, it's not something that there's a plus sign behind it or negative sign behind it. It's just all right. The end result is that it makes these fisheries better seemingly. So that's really the only calculation goes into is the end result.
Now, Lake Champlain is also on this list, and there's an Elite Series event that's happened there the last couple of years and is coming up this year as well. What are the draws that you found, on the New York Vermont border?
Well, I will tell you something, and I was just up there. I guess this is about I get this past spring, and it was tremendous, man. What is so amazing about Champlain is that you have an incredible smallmouth fishery alongside an incredible largemouth fishery. So you can kind of pick your poison when it comes to the style of fishing that you want. You're not only, throwing finesse baits in deep, clear water, but you can go fish for those big, the big green fish in shallow, weedy backwaters or coves or whatever, and you can power fish them. And then if you get tired of that, well, you pop out on the ledge and go catch, giant smallmouth too. And what I noticed about Champlain when I fished it this last time versus when I fished it prior was probably 10 years ago, is that the smallmouth have grown up. Used to you could go there and catch plenty of smallmouth, but they'd all be 2.5 pounds. I bet I caught four over 4.5 pounds this last time I went. So that really impressed me. The largemouth were still there and they're still very healthy. So it's kind of for Champlain to me, it's kind of a coin flip when it comes down to one. If you want to go win a tournament on that lake, you can probably do it with smallmouth, or you can go do it with largemouth if you get in the right spot. So that's a really special thing about that place, is that the quality of both types of bass are just so good.
I imagine makes it that much more complicated for the Elite Series fishermen who have to come up with a strategy when they get there.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting, very interesting to watch, because you have your typical, some of these pros love fishing for smallmouth and are very, very good at it. Some of them are amazing at catching largemouth, and not so much at smallmouth. So at Champlain, you're going to get to see guys fish to their strengths, my guess is, because it's gonna, or maybe both, because you maybe you can catch 2 4 pound largemouth and 3 4 pound small. I don't know. It's gonna be cool to watch, but seeing these guys, the best fishermen on the planet, fish to their strengths, in a place as amazing as Champlain is going to be fun to watch.
Well, and you talked about scenery, and it's tough to beat a place where you can see the Adirondacks on one side and the Green Mountains on the other and have this amazing lake in between.
Man, that place is so pretty. It ought to be illegal. I'm not. I know at one point I just sat down and quit fishing, just stared at Champlain, and then of course you have the monster thing, and I swore I wasn't going to tell my Elite Series, and I won't tell his name, but we did go live scan some really deep areas, but just to make sure that the monster wasn't near. But the legend, the lore, the beauty of that place is the fishing. That one's just, man, it's hard. That needs to be on everybody's bucket list as far as I'm concerned.
Well, so I have to ask, there are 100 lakes on this list. How many of them do you think you have fished?
Uh, Not enough. That'll be my answer. I'm guessing that are on this list, all from all 100, I maybe have fished 40. Like, you get on, when we first started doing it, I would take wild swings, and this year I'm going to take a California swing, and I'd go out there and I'd fish Delta and Clear Lake and Berryessa and knock three off the list and thought I did something. But I mean, they got 9 lakes on the list. I didn't even put a dent in it when I went to that state. So It's fun, and there's a couple more after, because we have beyond myself, we have three other riders that contribute to this list that live in these regions that they put together, and they come up with new lakes all the time, and some fall off this list. And there's a couple of new ones that I think I'm going to have to poke around and maybe put on my list for next year. To answer your question, not nearly enough.
Well, I was going to ask whether some of this is still an eye opener. I don't know how long you've been editing, but certainly you've been around the sport for a long time. There must be some that are still popping up that you were not aware of.
Yeah, yeah. As a matter of fact, some of the ones on, because I write in the Southeast region, since I live in the Southeast, and there were three on there that I found this year that had not that had never made the rankings. I've been with the magazine for almost 25 years now. So, and we started this thing, oh gosh, I guess 11, 12 years ago. So the very first lake to be ranked number one was Lake Falcon. And it was, guys were catching 30 pounds on an umbrella rig in one cast. I mean, it was just, and at that time you're thinking, oh my gosh, well, maybe this is a bad idea. There's not a lake that's ever going to be able to beat Falcon. And then 2 years ago, Falcon didn't even make the list. You have drought, you have overfishing, you have flood conditions, you have, there's fish kills because of lake turnover, poor management. There's just so many things that can affect a fishery that I have, over the years, past decade plus, I've been shocked at how much this list changes and turns over. So yeah, every year I'm excited to see what the guys in the other regions come up with. I'm always excited to find new lakes that I get to add to the Southeast region, and the Florida. Man, there are some amazing things happening in Florida right now, as there are in Texas. So we're actually about to head down to a sport fishing show, and I have a couple of those lakes that I haven't fished yet that I'm going to check off in the Sunshine State. But yeah, there's always some surprises, man. It's pretty amazing.
And so, where are we talking to you from? Where do you live?
I'm in Birmingham, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the world headquarters of BASS.
Very nice. Happy to be done with this issue, though.
Yes. Of all the issues I do, I hate this one the most. It is, well, for two reasons. Hey, it's a lot of work, and I'd rather be fishing than working. That's kind of how that goes. But then you also can't make anybody happy, because you do your best to get the list right. And the guys whose home lake is on that list, they get mad. They're like, I didn't want you to tell anybody about Burton Mullet Lake in Michigan. You ruined it forever. And then the guys whose favorite lake isn't on there get mad. They're like, you don't know anything. Lake Mitchell in Alabama is the best spotted bass fishing lake, you dummy. So, it's never, you never make anybody happy. But I think all the people in the middle, it's that 500,000 readers in the middle that that's our sweet spot that we're trying to help out. So yeah, it's a love-hate relationship with this thing. I love the conversation that it creates, and hopefully the results that it gives the folks who don't have a whole lot of time to go fishing, points them in the right direction. That's the part that I love about it.
Well, I enjoyed it for sure, and I really enjoyed talking with you. Thank you so much.
No, man, it's been my pleasure. I sure appreciate your interest in this, and I hope that you get to get out on the water sometime soon and test out the list for yourself.
James Hall, editor-in-chief of Bassmaster Magazine, talking with us about the magazine's July-August issue, which places the St. Lawrence River as the #2 bass fishing site in the country. Down from #1 last year, but still pretty impressive. And hey, it was #1 in the Northeast, and Lake Champlain was #5. You'll find a link to the whole shebang at ncpr.org/northwards. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Northwards. I'm Mitch Tyke. I hope you enjoyed our interview, and you can catch new content every Friday right here or wherever you get your podcasts. Find out more about Northwards and NCPR on our mobile app or at our website, ncpr.org. And while you're there, make a donation to support everything you hear on North Country Public Radio.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.